Stories from the trail tell of a young cowboy who showed up for a cattle drive wearing a brand new yellow shirt. He was proud of it. Yellow dye was expensive, hard to get that color to hold in fabric. His trail boss took one look and said, "Change that shirt or you're not riding with us." The cowboy laughed. He thought the old man was joking. He wasn't. When the young man refused to change, the boss left him behind, left him standing in the dust while the crew rode north with 3,000 head of cattle. 3 weeks later, on that same drive, another cowboy wearing a borrowed yellow bandana was killed when his horse threw him into a ravine during a river crossing. When word got back, that young cowboy burned his yellow shirt in his fireplace. According to those who knew him, he never wore yellow again. This is the story of frontier superstitions. Not the silly, harmless kind, but the ones that governed life and death decisions. The ones that could get you fired, get you killed, or maybe, just maybe, save your life. These weren't old wives' tales told around a fireplace. These were survival codes documented in cowboy memoirs, trail diaries, and interviews with old-timers who actually lived this life. And it all starts with the deadliest color in the West, yellow. Nobody knows for certain why cowboys feared yellow, but they did, deeply. Ramon Adams, who spent decades collecting cowboy folklore, documented that some outfits had explicit rules. No yellow clothing permitted. Trail bosses weren't joking about this. They wouldn't risk it. There are several theories. The first connects to cowardice. In many cultures, yellow represented weakness, and a yellow belly was someone who'd run from a fight. Some believed that wearing yellow attracted cowardly behavior, that the color itself transferred bad luck. The second theory is more practical. Yellow made you visible. Against the browns and greens of the prairie, yellow stood out. Cowboys believed it made you a target for hostile native warriors or outlaws who wanted to take a shot from a distance. The third theory connects to disease. Yellow fever had devastated frontier towns throughout the 1800s. Memphis, New Orleans, smaller settlements saw populations decimated. In the folk medicine of the time, yellow became associated with the disease itself. Wearing yellow was like inviting death. The fourth theory is simpler. Nobody remembered why it was bad luck, but everyone knew it was. That's how superstitions work. They outlive their origins. A cowboy in 1880 might not have known the reason, but he knew his father wouldn't wear yellow, his trail boss wouldn't wear yellow, and the last man who did had died badly. That was enough. The superstition was so strong, it lasted well into the 20th century. Rodeo cowboys in the 1920s and 1930s still avoided yellow. Some modern Western riders still won't wear it. But yellow wasn't the only color with power. Green was considered unlucky for gamblers. Professional gamblers who made their living at card tables wouldn't sit at a poker table wearing green. The theory was that green was the color of money, and wearing it somehow neutralized your ability to win. And then there was the most morbid superstition of all. Never wear a dead man's clothes. On the frontier, where resources were scarce and clothing expensive, it was common to redistribute belongings of someone who died. His saddle, his rope, his tools, all practical items. But his clothes, many cowboys wouldn't touch them. The belief was that wearing a dead man's clothes transferred his fate to you. If he died violently, you would too. This created an interesting problem documented in several trail accounts. A dead cowboy's clothes often couldn't be sold or given away. They'd be burned or buried with him or simply abandoned. Perfectly good clothing, wasted because nobody would risk the curse. But superstitions didn't stop at clothing. Your hat, the single most important item a cowboy owned, had its own mythology. A cowboy's hat wasn't just protection from sun and rain. It was his identity, his trademark. And there were rules, unbreakable rules. First and foremost, never put a hat on a bed. This superstition was universal across the West and is documented extensively in cowboy memoirs. A hat on a bed meant death, either yours or someone in the household. The origin likely traces back to the fact that when someone died, their body was often laid out on the bed, and their hat was placed over their face if they died violently. The association stuck. Cowboys took this so seriously that some would refuse to enter a room if they saw a hat on a bed. They'd make you remove it before they'd cross the threshold. If your hat blew off while riding, which way it landed predicted your future. Brim up meant good luck ahead. Brim down meant trouble coming. Losing your hat during a river crossing was particularly bad. Some believed it meant someone on the drive would drown. And the most sacred rule: never touch another man's hat without permission. A man's hat was personal. Touching it uninvited could start a fight. Hats had power, but so did boots. Never put boots on a table. This superstition was just as serious as the hat on bed rule and appears repeatedly in frontier folklore collections. Boots on a table invited death into the home. Some said it was because the boots of a hanged man often ended up at eye level, dangling, and putting boots on a table recreated that image. New boots had to be christened before they brought good luck. Deliberately stepping in something unpleasant, horse manure was traditional with your first wearing. Cowboys believed boots needed to experience the worst of ranch life immediately to protect you from it later. If a boot came off during a stampede, you were doomed. This was part superstition, part statistical reality. A cowboy who lost a boot during a stampede was likely already in serious trouble. Some cowboys even believed that the direction your boots pointed when you slept mattered. Toes pointing toward the door meant you'd leave safely in the morning. Toes pointing away meant you might not leave at all. In bunkhouses, cowboys would sometimes adjust each other's boots at night, making sure everyone's toes pointed toward the door. These might sound like silly rituals, but consider this. You're a 19-year-old kid, hundreds of miles from home, sleeping on the ground with rattlesnakes crawling through camp, about to ride a half-wild horse through a herd of nervous longhorns. If pointing your boots a certain direction gives you one tiny bit of psychological comfort, one small feeling of control in chaos, you point your boots that direction. And when your life depends on your horse, you develop superstitions about horses too. Cowboys spent more time with their horses than with people. They slept near them, ate near them, trusted them with their lives, so naturally they watched their horses for signs. White horses were either extremely lucky or cursed, never in between. Some cowboys refused to ride white horses entirely. Others believed white horses had supernatural protection, that they could sense danger before it arrived. The truth is that white horses are exactly as safe as any other color, but confirmation bias is powerful. If a horse refused to cross water, cowboys believed it sensed danger, quicksand, unstable footing, hidden drop-offs. Horses do have better instincts about water safety than humans, so this superstition had a basis in reality. But cowboys extended this. If a horse stomped 3 times before you mounted, you should turn back. The day was cursed. Never name a horse after someone living. This belief held that it created a mystical connection, and if something happened to the horse, it would happen to the person too. If your horse bucked every morning going to work but never coming home, cowboys said, quit that job. The horse knows something you don't. But the most important superstitions weren't about individual items or animals. They were about the drive itself. Never start a cattle drive on a Friday. This was nearly universal and is documented in numerous trail boss accounts. Friday was an unlucky day, inherited from maritime superstition. Starting on Friday meant trouble. Stampedes, drownings, attacks, rustlers, never count the cattle. This seems counterintuitive, but cowboys believed counting cattle invited loss. It was like counting money before you'd earned it. The act of counting tempted fate to prove you wrong. Trail bosses would count because that was their job, but regular cowboys avoided it. The first person to die on a drive cursed the entire journey. This dark belief held that an early death was a bad omen, that more deaths would follow. Some trail bosses, after losing a man early, would seriously consider turning back. Certain songs could summon storms or stampedes. Cowboys sang constantly to keep cattle calm, but they chose carefully. Fast songs made cattle nervous. Songs with too much thunder or violence could trigger stampedes. And one of the most powerful superstitions, never look back after leaving on a cattle drive. Looking back meant you'd never return home. Cowboys would say their goodbyes, mount up, and ride north without a single glance over their shoulder. But the darkest superstitions, the ones that kept cowboys awake at night, weren't about clothing or horses or trail rituals. They were about death itself. On the frontier, death wasn't hidden away in hospitals. It was everywhere. And because death was so present, people developed elaborate systems for predicting it. Animal omens were taken seriously and documented extensively by folklorists studying frontier life. If an owl called your name, or made a sound that resembled your name, you'd die within the year. Owls were death birds in multiple cultures. Some cowboys would actively avoid camping near areas with many owls. Coyotes crossing your path from different directions had different meanings. Left to right was bad luck. Right to left was good. Ravens and crows had an entire counting system. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy. 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret, 8 for a secret, 9 for a secret, 10 for a secret. For a secret never to be told, cowboys would actually count ravens and base their expectations for the day on the number. If a horse refused to pass a certain spot on the trail, cowboys believed someone had died there. Some trail routes had spots that horses consistently avoided, and cowboys would dismount and lead their horses around these places. A rooster crowing at midnight meant death was visiting. Roosters crow at dawn. Midnight crowing was unnatural. Buzzards were perhaps the most watched birds. If buzzards circled but didn't land, someone nearby was dying but hadn't died yet. The buzzards were waiting. Cowboys who saw buzzards circling would sometimes fire shots to scare them away, believing they could chase death away with the birds. Hearing your name called when you were alone meant death was following you. Some cowboys who experienced this would change their route entirely, believing that if you didn't answer the voice, death might not find you. Stumbling when entering a new place, a house, a saloon, a new camp, meant you'd leave that place in a coffin. Pictures falling off walls predicted death in the family. Cowboys away from home worried constantly about their families. A picture falling was taken as a sign that someone back home had died or was dying. Clock stopping at the exact moment of death was so commonly reported that many people accepted it as fact. And then there were the dreams. Cowboys took dreams seriously. Dreaming of muddy water meant trouble was coming. Dreaming of clear running water meant good fortune ahead. Dreaming of teeth falling out meant a death in the family. Some cowboys who had this dream would request to leave the drive immediately. But the most powerful dreams were visits from dead relatives. Cowboys who dreamed of dead relatives would be extra careful the next day, watching for danger, trusting nothing. These weren't abstract concerns. These were practical worries for men who faced death constantly. And nowhere was death more present than at the gambling tables. Gambling wasn't casual entertainment. It was how men passed time, socialized, tested each other. For professional gamblers, it was their livelihood, which meant superstitions around gambling were deadly serious. The most famous gambling superstition in the West is the dead man's hand. On August 2nd, 1876, in Deadwood, Dakota Territory, Wild Bill Hickok sat down to play poker at Nuttall and Mann's saloon. Usually, Hickok sat with his back to the wall, facing the door. But that day, another player had that seat. Hickok asked him to switch. The man refused, so Hickok sat with his back to the door. A drifter named Jack McCall walked in behind him and shot him in the back of the head. Hickok died instantly, slumping forward over his cards. According to legend, when those cards were collected, they showed 2 black aces and 2 black eights. The 5th card was never recorded with certainty, though various accounts claim it was the Queen of Hearts, the Queen of Diamonds, or the 5 of Diamonds. That hand became cursed. From that day forward, drawing aces and eights was considered the worst possible omen. Some gamblers would fold immediately if they got that hand. Others refused to play if they saw someone else dealt it. But Hickok's death reinforced an even older rule: never sit with your back to the door. Professional gamblers always sat facing the door. Always. They needed to see who was entering, who was reaching for a gun, who was drunk and dangerous. Hickok violated this rule once, the day he died. Other gambling superstitions were equally strict and appear in accounts from professional gamblers of the era. Never count your money at the table. Counting your money was both rude and unlucky. It was showing off, tempting fate to take it back. Crossing your legs while playing meant you were crossing out your luck. Professional gamblers sat with feet flat on the floor, and this had a practical component too. Uncrossed legs meant you could move quickly if violence erupted. Never lend money to another player. This superstition held that lending money at a gambling table cursed both the lender and borrower. Neither would win. Never play cards with someone who just received terrible news. That person carried bad luck, and it would spread to everyone at the table. But gamblers also had positive superstitions. Some carried lucky coins from specific years. Others kept rabbit's feet, horseshoes, religious medals. These had to be touched during key moments. Wearing the same clothes during winning streaks. Never counting money until done for the night. Specific seat preferences that became legendary. These rituals gave gamblers a sense of control in games that were purely chance. And in a world where a bad hand could cost you everything, any edge, even an imaginary one, was worth taking. But gambling superstitions were just one thread in a larger tapestry. The American frontier was a melting pot of beliefs documented by folklorists and anthropologists. Cowboys came from everywhere: Texas, Mexico, Africa, Ireland, Germany, native tribes. Each brought their own superstitions, and on the trail, these beliefs blended together. Native American influences were strong. Many cowboys adopted beliefs about animal spirits, sacred spaces, and the protective power of turquoise. Mexican vaquero traditions contributed heavily. Mal de Ojo, the evil eye, saint medallions and their specific powers, blessing new equipment. African American cowboys brought traditions from the South: mojo bags for protection, crossroads magic, root work adapted to frontier life. These hoodoo practices were sophisticated folk medicine and protection systems. European immigrants added their own beliefs: Irish and Scottish superstitions about death omens, German hex signs, English folklore about animals and weather. All of these traditions met on the open range and influenced each other. A black cowboy might wear a Catholic saint medal alongside a mojo bag. A white cowboy might adopt native beliefs about horses while keeping his Irish fear of ravens. The frontier created something new, a hybrid superstition system drawn from everyone who wrote it. So why did grown men, tough men who faced stampedes and river crossings and outlaws, believe in these superstitions? The answer is simple: control. On the frontier, death was random. You could do everything right and still die. A rattlesnake you didn't see, lightning from a clear sky, a horse that spooked for no reason, disease you couldn't cure, violence you couldn't predict. Superstitions gave the illusion of control. If you followed the rules, didn't wear yellow, didn't put your hat on the bed, didn't sit with your back to the door, maybe you'd survive. And here's the thing. Sometimes the superstitions actually helped. Not because they were magic, but because believing in them made cowboys more careful. A cowboy who believed horses sensed danger paid more attention to his horse's behavior. A gambler who never sat with his back to the door was genuinely safer. A cowboy who refused to start a drive on Friday probably used that extra day to prepare better. Confirmation bias did the rest. When superstitions worked, people remembered. When they failed, there was always an explanation. You didn't follow the ritual correctly. Some other factor interfered. The bad luck was delayed. The human brain is pattern-seeking. We're designed to find connections, even when they don't exist. Cowboys weren't stupid or ignorant. They were humans operating under extreme stress with limited information, doing what humans always do, trying to make sense of chaos. Today we might laugh at the cowboy who wouldn't wear yellow, or the gambler who carried a rabbit's foot, or the trail boss who wouldn't start a drive on Friday. But these weren't simple men. They were people facing death daily, trying to find patterns in chaos, seeking any edge that might keep them alive one more day. Some superstitions were nonsense. Others were survival wisdom dressed in folklore. And when you're alone on the prairie at midnight, or deep in a mine with a mountain above you, or sitting with your back to a saloon door in Dodge City, maybe you'd believe them too. Because on the frontier, luck wasn't just a concept. It was the difference between going home and being buried where you fell. The cattle drives are long over. The mines are closed. The gambling halls have been torn down. But the superstitions remain, documented in the memoirs of men like Charles Siringo, Andy Adams, and Teddy Blue Abbott, preserved in the folklore collections of J. Frank Dobie and Ramon Adams, recorded in interviews with old cowboys conducted in the 1930s by the Works Progress Administration. These weren't myths created by Hollywood. They were real beliefs held by real men who lived real lives on the frontier. And if you ever see a cowboy hat on a bed, you'll probably move it, just in case.